including recent nonstop sales boom. In addition to being the certified sales professional, she is also an inductee into the Speaking Hall of Fame. She's recognized as one of the foremost thought leaders on the future of selling by leading publications worldwide, has been named #1 sales influencer, and is followed on LinkedIn. So I recommend all of you after today's presentation to follow her on LinkedIn. I think you'll find that in addition to today's presentation, she has a lot of insights to share. For today, I'm going to, before I hand it over, I'm going to discuss one piece of housekeeping. If you have any questions as you go through today's presentation, please put them in the chat box. Colleen will look at them as they come through and answer as the opportunity presents. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Colleen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And it's a real pleasure to be with you guys today. Thanks so much for taking some time out over your lunch. As was mentioned, I'm really excited to take your questions as we go. So don't hesitate to throw them into the chat. If I can't get to them here, then I'll try to get to them on our social media or post some blogs on the answers for you there. So today we're going to talk about right on the money. Being right on the money. And I wanted to dive into a couple of things in detail rather than covering the entire subject, because in fact, this is the title of my brand new book that's being released in March. So we've got an entire book on this topic, but there's some really key things that I think are going on in the marketplace right now that, that we should be aware of so that you can start to apply them to your sales channel, to whether it's you're selling products or services immediately. So the first thing we truly have to understand is what's going on with the buyer. I really believe that we have to play to this new buyer mindset where they're constantly asking themselves 3 questions. Should I engage? Do I have time? And am I confident? And, buyers are changing dramatically. They've actually been changing for probably 5 to 7 years. The change has dramatically been accelerated as we've come through COVID. But this decision confidence, this third point here, is a critical issue for us to manage as salespeople. And in fact, decision confidence is probably the single biggest hurdle that we have to face as salespeople because it's at an all-time low. Now, how we define that is not, are they confident in you? Do they trust you? That's still applicable. But what's different about decision confidence from overall confidence, it's, am I confident in myself to make a decision, period. And so we need to help our buyers through that lack of confidence. Otherwise, we end up with no decision or the decision to stay with an existing supplier or just general confusion. There's a lot of reasons why that confidence is at an all-time low, and we'll dive into those as we go through this. But I wanted to start at the top piece here, which is just, should I engage? In other words, should I return your phone call? Should I return your email? Should I engage with your website? Should I actually continue this conversation past, the initial call or the initial meeting or the second meeting that you've even had here? And primarily, the customer is asking themselves, again, 3 more detailed questions here. Is the seller's value aligned with my value as a person? Do the results you say you can produce match my objectives, both personally and operationally? And is value front and center? In other words, is it clear to me what that value is? And, these are not just questions that are being asked by a prospect that you're trying to sell into. These are also ongoing questions that an existing customer is selling in order to decide whether to be loyal or not and stay with you. So everything we talk about here, I think, can be framed in both that net new customer acquisition as well as client retention, because I'm sure many of you on this call, like many of my clients, work in an environment where retention is the key to profitability, right? Our goal isn't to just sell a customer and forget they existed. Our goal is to sell a customer and keep that customer for life, because the profitability comes in the run rate of orders that come in monthly or quarterly or annually in year 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, or however long the life cycle of that customer is. So here's where many salespeople make a mistake, is they define value in a singular way. And that value that they define is generally tangible and maybe aligned with just the person that they're talking to. And that is going to erode decision confidence, as you'll see as we work through here. The key to really answering this question, should I engage, and to get inside, take advantage of this new buyer mindset, is to recognize that value needs to be operational and personal. So I have clients who call this multi-threaded value. And I really like that approach, because we're not just talking about the value on a single buyer or stakeholder. We're talking about how this value affects the entire operation. And there's really 4 categories that every seller needs to go through when qualifying a customer or in the customer discovery process in order to build the best business case to increase confidence to ensure that we win the business. And these are tough conversations, okay? This is not an easy thing to do. It's not rocket science. What I mean by it's not easy is it does take a distinctly different seller's mindset here, because we have to make sure that we look, act, and sound different from the competition. One thing that I have discovered about companies who really have embraced this concept of being right on the money is that they do not advocate for an apples to apples comparison with their competitors. They're always figuring out how we can force the conversation into an apples to oranges comparison. And one of the key ways that they do that is by differentiating themselves in the sales process. Though I know that pretty much everybody out there, I mean, this happens with every customer I work with. I'll say to them things like, hey, what makes you different? Or how do you sell against the competition? And they always say, you know, we're better, we provide better service, you know, things like that. And of course, everybody is saying that. What's key to being right on the money here and to really building that confidence is to ensure that you show them that you're different. I want your prospects to sit back during a sales meeting and say, just a second here, what's going on? This is unlike any conversation I've had with a salesperson in the technology space or the industrial supply space. This isn't like the other guy that came in. When you've done that, you've transformed the relationship. You've clearly differentiated in the early part of the sales cycle, which is going to ensure that you're not compared like a commodity to the competition at the end, right? Because if all they have is a group of suppliers that look, act, and sound the same, then they're only going to use price as a differentiator, and that's going to kill you in this marketplace. So what are we looking at? We're looking at dividing value into two things, two groups, personal and operational. Personal is what matters to the person you're talking to. Operational is what matters to the business. Personal, tangible value. Tangible value is something that we can measure very clearly. It's usually measured in time, volume, or some kind of numeric value, money, right? So it could be personal tangible value could be understanding how this person is paid and how they're bonused. It could be understanding the overtime that they or their colleagues, their direct reports are experiencing. It could be about time off. It could be about them, looking like the hero and getting a promotion, right? It could be any of those kinds of things that can be measured. There's also personal intangible value. And what that means is truly understanding the things that are harder to measure: stress, culture, absenteeism, risk, personal safety or employee safety, team safety, that a customer may not be able to put a dollar figure on, but do have true value to the organization. Now, I'll let you in on a bit of a secret here. And I wrote an article on this in our, it's on our website at engageselling.com. I actually don't believe that intangible value can't be measured. As I started thinking about this and putting this together, I realized, all of these things are really tangible. You can monetize stress in the organization because it shows up in absenteeism. It shows up in turnover. It shows up in overtime. You can measure the value of having a positive or negative culture by whether your employees stick around or not, right? Whether they stay, whether they go the extra mile, whether they service the customer on their 41st hour of the week, or they go home at 39.9 hours. there can be a way to monetize risk. If you're working in a field where there's real compliance risk, that can be monetized. And again, safety, right? These days, it's not just about sort of workplace health and safety, the way we might have thought about it in the past, whether it's, ergonomics or trip hazards or driving hazards. It's also COVID hazards, right? And whether or not employees are safe at work. So all of those things can be monetized. And the best salespeople I work with actually work with their customers to figure out what that's costing the company, what that's costing this stakeholder that they're talking to in this time. Why do they care about stress in the workplace? To really dig in to say, we have people who are absent. So what happens when they're absent? We have to call in replacements. How much does that cost you? And you're still paying, that person's salary. So, stress is causing absenteeism, which is leading to X thousands a month, if that's an issue that you can resolve. So then we shift over to this operational value. And, I would say that this kind of operational value is really easy. This is where most salespeople have no problem in understanding the operational value for that one person, right? So whoever that primary stakeholder is. But what I want to do is challenge you here to force the conversation into a much broader sphere. So it's not just about the person you're talking to and how you can help them be better at their job or their job function or their part of the operation. It's about how them being better affects everybody else. So I'll give you an interesting example. The oil and gas industry is one that I work heavily in. And it's been an interesting year to be working in the oil and gas industry. Or last year, they've had 6 or 7 price increases. We have supply shortages, we have shutdowns, we have slowdowns, we have drivers who can't get product. So it's been a world of challenges. Yet the best sellers are very good at figuring out how their product affects the entire organization. So they have a product. One of my clients has a product that allows them to keep the oil in the trucks longer. Okay. We call this extending drain intervals. Hang on for just one second. I promise there's a point to this. So they can say, hey, I noticed that you're looking to hire 5 mechanics right now. And those job postings have been up for, a year. We can't find those people, right? Well, our product will allow you to keep the trucks on the road twice as long, which will reduce your need to hire those people. So now it's not just a mechanics issue or the head of the mechanical department. It's now an HR issue, right? It's now a finance issue. It's now the CEO or the owner's issue because they can see how doing business a different way is actually going to save them money, save them stress, save them headache, save them the risk of onboarding the wrong people. It also becomes a sales issue. Hey, I know you're often late delivering product to customers. If we can keep those trucks on the road twice as long, you can deliver more products to more customers, making them happy, right? So those kinds of things, while you might just think, wow, it's just oil in a truck, right? Yet the smartest sellers have been able to show how this affects sales, how it affects customer service, how it affects HR, how it affects finance. And everybody on this call has a product, I am convinced, without even knowing what businesses you are in, that can affect multiple departments. And as you'll see, as we continue to build on this model, that is what creates the largest decision confidence. That's what really gets people excited about your product and differentiates you from the competition. You might be saying to yourself right now, hey, Colleen, well, our competition can do those things too. I would bet, though, unless they're working with me, they're not. Because most salespeople are afraid to get more people engaged in the sales cycle. They feel they're going around or above or behind the person they're talking to, and they don't understand how to do this inclusively to get people excited. This approach is what really gets you out of that stuck position where you're stuck in a gatekeeper position or you're stuck with someone not returning your calls, because it forces that conversation into such an inclusive and broad scope. People are actually excited to get their colleagues involved. When it comes to intangible value as well, very similar on the personal side. We're seeing right now employee safety, brand reputation, corporate culture, corporate values. And again, if we go back to that example I used from the oil and gas industry, in this case, it can be brand reputation, right? So if you've got a marketing department, we can help with your brand reputation because you're now never late. Your trucks are never stopped on the side of the road. And this is going to help you attract more people, attract more customers, right? Improve your retention. So we can continue expanding this across pretty much every department inside the organization by figuring out how the product that we sell not only affects the primary buyer or stakeholder, but then the trickle down effect to all of those other departments. And that's truly how you capture value inside an organization, and set yourself apart from the competition. I see salespeople all the time kind of roll their eyes at me and they're like, oh my God, but this is going to take so long. It doesn't have to take long, right? If it's done right, people are going to get engaged quickly, but it doesn't matter if it takes you a week longer or a couple of weeks longer, or a couple of days longer, or even a couple of hours longer, because what this does is ensures that the competition is not even considered. Now, if you're in a business where you might be doing 80% or maybe even 90% client retention work right now, this model can be applied as well, because now you have a model to go back and really uncover the value that's important to your customers and how you're affecting the entire organization, and use this as a retention strategy. A retention strategy, maybe even a growth strategy if you found that your growth has stalled inside an existing customer. So I've got the chat function open here. If anyone has questions, of course, I know there's a lot of us on the call today, so don't hesitate to ask whatever question you want as we're going through. So let's shift gears and talk about time. And the big one here is just this general question of, are they making this easy for me? Because like all of you on the phone today, on Zoom, now I sound old-fashioned, don't I? Like all of you on Zoom today, your buyers are pressed for time. You know, one of my good friends, Jill Conrath, wrote a book a lot of years ago called The Crazy Busy Buyer, and Selling to the Crazy Busy Buyer. I think if she was rewriting that book now, I think she'd have to change the title to Changing to the Even More Crazy Busy Buyer, right? In today's marketplace, we are in what I call a wait, hurry up decision-making pattern. And that's because people are stressed for time, because there is such a shortage of people in the workplace in decision-making capacity. And so what's happening is most of your buyers are tasked with multiple jobs, multiple initiatives. Their businesses are moving fast. They're growing, or they're making up for last year or the year before, and they can't get people to fill those jobs. And so although they know they've got to start the process of finding a solution to a problem that they're having, they're really making a just-in-time decision. And so we're seeing sales cycles shorten quite a bit because buyers are waiting until they're absolutely at that last minute to make these decisions. And they're doing a lot of research on their own behind the scenes, maybe after hours or while they're multitasking, and they're only engaging with salespeople when they absolutely have to. When I started selling, I started in the life insurance business, man, close to, well, I don't even really want to think about it, but I guess it's 30 years ago now. How old was I? Yeah, I guess 30 years ago. It used to be for us that our buyers didn't really know who we were until we called them, right? You know, I used to sit in my office with the white pages of all things, and just decide randomly pick a phone number and start calling people. That was the ultimate cold call. Today, we often don't know who our buyers are until they're ready to be seen. They're hiding behind the scenes doing things. And when they're ready, they're going to make themselves known to us. What they're doing, a fantastic report, if you have access to any of the Gartner research, this report called The Future of Sales in 2025 is fantastic in terms of what's going on based on the deep research that they're doing. This chart is kind of a summary for what's going on inside the buyer's mind. And I think it is absolutely mandatory thinking for all salespeople, but also all organizations. because it's using data like this that is going to help us take a whole company approach to selling. So let's talk about what this looks like. Couple of things here. One, you'll see 17% of our buyers are in their buying cycle time is spent talking with potential, planners, suppliers, salespeople, vendors, whatever we want to call them there, right? So only 17% of their time. Now, if you're in a competitive situation and there's 3 of you, that's 17% spread 3 ways. You don't get the whole 17%. You only get half or a third or a quarter, right? So that's 17%. The other 83% here is spent without you involved. So when I first looked at this, I thought, oh man, this is kind of depressing. And I guess we better maximize that 17%. We better be really, really good at that 17% with our specific buyer. And then I slept on it for a bit and I started thinking about a differentiated way to look at this. And what we started doing with our customers is saying to them, yeah, let's be good at that. Of course, we don't want to be mediocre at that 17%, but actually let's affect this other 83%. Let's get ourselves in front of that buying community. Let's get ourselves in front of this independent, online research and offline research. Let's figure out who those others are in our business and make sure we're getting in front of them. Let's create what I like to call a ubiquitous situation where when your buyer stakeholder goes to their community, everyone around the table is saying, yeah, you should buy from Jeff. You should buy from Jeff. You should buy from Jeff. Or I was talking with Jeff. Let's create a situation where in this 18% where they're researching online or offline, 27% online, that they bumble into us everywhere, right? Because now we're affecting the full 100% of their buying time. We're inserting ourselves into every single piece, and that's going to differentiate you because you're pushing the competition out. So I have a question here. Is there a particular book that I would suggest to support my approach? I guess I should promote my own books, right? So Nonstop Sales Boom, which is available now. It's been out for a few years. You are welcome, of course, to purchase that one on Amazon. And the brand new, this is like the hot commodity here. It's not shipping until the end of March, but you can also find it on Amazon if you want to pre-order that right now. So thank you, Jeffrey, for bringing that up. I appreciate it. So, this is a critical slide, and I think we should be paying attention to this because now what I'm saying is, it's not even just all sales responsibility to bring in revenue. There's opportunities for other people in the organization to affect these areas. Depending on the size of the organization you work for, this online research bucket, this 27%, of course, can be affected by marketing, but it can also be affected by other people in your organization who participate in maybe the social channels that your company uses in order to push out information. This research independently offline, again, of course, can be affected by marketing who might be going to trade shows, setting up referrals, but it can also be affected by everyone else in the organization who's got a network, and the way they conduct themselves in that network reflects either poorly or greatly on your organization. I like to say that every single person in your organization is a profit center, meaning they have the ability to either make your company client attractive or client repellent. And you all know the pop culture references to where one single employee who may or may not have been customer facing did something that caused that company to look repellent, or did something to make that company look extraordinary, right? And that's what we're talking about here. And so I truly believe that those companies I work with that I would consider to be right on the money are those whose entire organization is focused on improving the brand reputation of that company on a daily basis. The other here, just as a definition, is other because it's unique, right? So as you do this research, and as Gartner does this research with their, few hundred or a few thousand customers, members, the other could be in the financial services business. It could be a legal team or a banking team. It could be consulting teams. It could be industry associations that are unique to that organization. It could be unique sets of consultants or bankers to that association. You guys know your business the best, and so you'll start to know who that other is. But it's 16%. It's almost equal to the amount of time they spend with you. And so we really need to be paying attention to it. And to do that, I'm going to show you a strategy that really helps make it easy for the customer to find you, and improve their confidence level by impacting all the people around them. When we talk about confidence here, what people are going to start doing is looking at what their community says. Years ago, again, probably going back 30 years, and I'm sure some of you lived this, right? That the old sales expression, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right? The expression, nobody gets fired for buying IBM, right? Those are all confidence, internal confidence factors that buyers are asking themselves about. And in this high-risk marketplace, we're in a high-risk marketplace in terms of buying, people are going to look to others to say, what is everyone else saying? Because they'll say to themselves, well, I can't get fired if all 12 executives think that this is a good idea. I can't get fired if the best consultants or my banker says it's a good idea, right? I'm not going to make a bad decision if the value is proven by so many other people. And so your job is to use all of these other people to help build confidence in your buyer. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I spend a lot of time with companies in very traditional industries, manufacturing, oil and gas, commodity products. And they've been the slowest industries to adopt, new technologies, social media, marketing, into their sales channel. In fact, I work with a number of companies who still will cold call physically door to door. That's how they get in the door. And it's worked well for them for many years. So I'm not disparaging it. I'm just saying that for some of you in technology and finance, you might be thinking, what the heck? People still do that? They absolutely do. And they build million or billion dollar businesses doing it. And they are the first ones to push back at me and say, hey, Colleen, this is still a people business. And so for those of you on the video right now who are saying, yeah, it's a people business, right? You have to build relationships. Absolutely 100%. In fact, I would go so far as to say it's even more people. It's even more of a people business now than it ever has been. And that's because there are more people involved in the sales cycle than ever before. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, or a tricky thing to manage, maybe I'll say. It's a good thing because all of those people can be your secret sales force, as I like to say. They can be that group that advocates on your behalf and floods the marketplace with such good reviews and case studies and testimonials and use cases that people can't ignore you. They see you everywhere, and so they automatically think you're the best. The downside is, or the challenge we have as organizations, is your customers, your prospects, are likely to believe a whole host of people that you may not have ever met inside the sales channel. There are people who are making recommendations, who are talking about the industry that you may never meet. Yet they're affecting your ability to sell into your client base. And what we've found in watching what's going on is that our prospects believe the quantity of people more than they even believe the quality. They start to believe referrals and testimonials and star reviews or whatever it is in your industry at a volume level, even when they're strangers, as compared to a one-off referral to a high quality referral source that you've given them. And I encourage you to think about your own buying behavior here. If I use me as an example, I needed to buy some video equipment for my business last year. We were upgrading our studio. And so I went to my marketing team, social media manager, marketing team, who is an outsourced provider of mine that I've had for years. And I trust them explicitly. I know that they will give me good advice, and I know they will tell me exactly what I need. And so they gave me recommendations for brands and, styles of things I needed to buy. So of course, what do? I go onto Amazon and I start looking at these products, and I start to notice, buyers who bought that also buy. And I start to read the reviews, and I, click through and click through and click through, get lost in the quagmire. And I start to form my own opinion based on what I see other people doing who I don't know. Whether there are lots of reviews or few reviews, whether those reviews are good or bad, the volume of reviews, right? Like I looked at a product that my team recommended. I'm like, but only like 50 people have bought and reviewed that. And the reviews are good, but 1,500 people have bought this one and the reviews are pretty good too. So maybe I should buy that other one. And I noticed in my own behavior that I was believing, quantity over quality. And of course, we have to, you might be saying, well, sure, Colleen, but you're a small business and you're buying, consumer products. Well, I was buying business products for one, but two, what's important to remember right now is that the B2B marketplace follows B2C buying patterns by a couple of years. So this has been going on Amazon for, 5-10 years, right? It's now showing up on the B2B side, absolutely, in every industry I'm working in. I like to call it the Amazonification of business. And in fact, in the last couple of years, it's become even more exaggerated because as older workers are moving on, right? I like to call it the Great Escape. As people are choosing not to come back to work, retire, do their own thing, or leave the industry completely, younger buyers are coming into more senior roles as stakeholders and buyers. Younger buyers, of course, are more digitally native than those of us who have been around for 30 years or more. They're used to buying products this way. And so their brain says, hey, if I can buy a pair of jeans this way, why can't I buy engine oil, multi-million-dollar telephone equipment, software? And in fact, what's really interesting to me is that pre-pandemic, a study came out that showed that 33% of all people in the buying cycle, so in that buying community, if you want to call it that, 33% of them would prefer a sellerless buying experience. Doesn't mean they're going to get it or that they even can get it in their marketplace, but it says prefer. They would prefer to be able to just go online and buy it, 33%. Coming out of this pandemic, just towards the end of the year, I was on a call with the research firm, it was Gartner, and they redid that research. Just 12 months later, that number has jumped to 44%. And that's simply because of two things: younger buyers in the marketplace, right? We've seen a shift. And two, the fact that we have proven in this B2B space that it can be done, right? I mean, part of that lack of access that we have to our buyers that I talked about, that 17%, is the fact that they know that they can make a decision without us being present. We've experienced it over the last few years. In fact, one of my clients said, the lockdowns of 2020 proved one thing to him. He said, I have been telling my guys that they could sell over the phone and video conferencing effectively forever. And they're like, nope, got to get out there and see people. My customers will only order if we're in their office. And they've proven that I'm right. And so what I've done is I've reduced their mileage allowances, their meal allowances, their entertainment budgets, all that travel and living by 20% this year to force them to stay in the office one day a week. Now, he's not doing that because he wants to see them. He's doing that because he's seen the numbers and he knows how much more profitable, but also how much more efficient it is, especially in a busy sales environment. Many of you who are leaders on the phone right now, I know that you're probably struggling to hire people. I've got a client who just received a large round of investment for their software business and technology business, and they need to hire 50 or 60 salespeople this year. And I just kind of looked at, I said, where are you going to find these people? And he laughed, right? He said, yeah, that's my big problem this year is I got to find 60 people. No easy task, but at the same time, we can't afford not to grow, right? And so what's the way we can grow is we have to ask every salesperson to do more. Quotas are going up with less people. And how can we affect that? By having them use more technology, helping the buyers through this 44% that would prefer us not to be in their office and to improve their confidence. So the way we drive more effectiveness in the sales channel is by including more people, period. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We call it building critical mass influence. So I want you guys to think about yourselves as like the center, the hub here. This is you as a salesperson. There's 4 channels that we need to start affecting critically in our business. The first one is, of course, connecting with existing customers, right? And I mean by that, making sure that you've got contacts with your buyers and the primary stakeholders inside that organization that you're influencing. My general rule as a starting point for almost all customers is 4. There should be at least 4 people in every organization that you are connecting with. Your primary buyer, the backup, and a couple of other people. I'd be hard pressed to even think about a line of business that I do business with right now at Engage that wouldn't have 4 people as their buyers. And again, that's largely because I'm on the business to business side. Now, some of you might have 12, right? If you're selling services or products that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, you might have 10 or 12, and that's fine as well. But these should be people that you're engaged with on a regular basis. They're in your CRM, you're connected with them on LinkedIn, or if you use other social channels, that as well. Second group here that we want to affect is industry influencers. So I want, and these could be inside or outside of your customer, but who are the people in the industry who are the true influencers? It could be consultants. In my work with agricultural companies, it's often the state agronomist. It could be consultants, it could be bankers, it could be other people in the organization. Industry influencers could be the marketing or CEO of the organization you're working with. It could be, if you're in healthcare, the insurance providers, the payers, the HMO, or maybe it's the hospital, right? Who are those people? And we want to be connected to them. Because again, think about this. If your buyer is paying attention to the influencers or the advisors, and the influencer and the advisor is connected with you, we now create this cascading effect. We also want, of course, to engage with everybody inside your target prospect or your customer's buying community. And I don't mean just in those quadrants that I showed, the head person, but everybody below them as well. I wrote this in Nonstop Sales Boom. I have never, ever, ever seen a piece of business lost because you had too many contacts inside the account. But I have seen millions of dollars walk away because we've had too few. And if there was one problem I could solve for all salespeople, all organizations perennially forever and never have to talk about it again, it would be this one. If you do nothing different from last year, it's build out your contact base to have multiple people inside the account. So in pushing this with clients this year, we found some really interesting things. One of my clients in the technology space found that on prospects, new prospects, where they have engaged 4 or more decision makers, their closing ratio jumped to 70%, versus when they have less than 4, it hovers around an average of 30%. Another client of mine said that when we have 4 or more people engaged, we don't lose the customer. Now, that was really interesting. Another customer of mine in the oil and gas space said, we have discovered that when we team sell, so we have 1 or 2 of us partnered with 1 or 2 of them, our closing ratio jumps from 40 to 61%. So there is magic in these multiples. I'm not just saying this because I want to give you extra work. There's true magic in these multiple numbers, in these people that we're engaging. And that's simply because we're building more confidence, we're operationalizing the value, and we're standing out from your competition. And so take a good hard look at that community. Maybe build out that buyer's map, if you want to call it that, or org chart, whatever the term is, and truly understand how many people need to be engaged with. And don't say to yourself, oh, that person's irrelevant, or they're too low, or they're too high, or I'll never get over there. Figure out who all of those people are and use them as influencers, as spies, as stakeholders, as advisors. You can never go wrong having one of those conversations. And then, of course, the last piece, and I alluded to this with the team selling, is mobilize your colleagues and employees. Everybody in the organization needs to play a role in communicating your value out to the marketplace. For most organizations, if I had my way, and I don't always have my way 100% of the time, I would make sure that every single employee in the company had a LinkedIn account, and that they were all connected to the corporate account, and that every day, every person in the company shared a story that was connected to the company, or connected to news that was associated with the company, or connected to a customer. I mean, think about the power of that. Here you've got like 40 or 50 salespeople probably doing that on a weekly basis. And that's great if that's what's happening. But I want 400, 500, 1,000 people doing it on a daily basis. Think about the magnification of your value in the marketplace. And that's what's going to create true ubiquity. So I really like this question, how do you get other people involved? So the question, how do you get other people involved? For those of you who can't see the question, I'm seldom able to involve more than 1 or 2 buyers or decision makers in the deal. When I ask if there's others that will be part of the decision, they say there are no others, or they say they are, but they won't give me their names. In context, the person who asked this question is CRM, selling CRM. Yeah, some of this is truly around the way you're asking. I counsel my clients not to ask who else is involved, because I find that most people then shut down and don't provide you that information. What I prefer you do is to start operationalizing the value and ask questions. So CRM, let's say, for example, is to ask questions to say, hey, I'm curious, does your finance team get concerned because they can't see the quotes that are going out? Or how do you think your finance team will use the CRM too? Or maybe it's at a CEO level, you might say to them, or an ownership level if it's a smaller business. I'm curious what your owner would say about how they expect the CRM to effectively make the sales team more efficient. If we're automating parts of the sales process for you, do you think the CEO is going to have a return on investment requirement? They're going to say to you, I have no idea. How do you suggest we get them involved? How do you suggest we find out? So that's one way to do it, is to ask them questions they haven't thought about and they probably don't know the answers to. The other thing that I often do is, let's say I'm selling to an organization. I go into LinkedIn and I look at their organization and I start connecting with people. And I start connecting and talking about the fact that, hey, this is what we do, and we're chatting with you right now. I have a few questions. Then when my stakeholder says there's no one else, I'm able to say, I'm connected with ABC in technology, and I'm going to be giving him a call, or he and I are chatting online about X. I'd love to have a call with him, or I'm planning to have a call with him. Do you want to be engaged with that? Or are you happy for me to go at it myself? A third way is to show your current buyers how not getting people engaged early is actually going to be a big disadvantage to them. So I'll use IT in this example, because oftentimes people don't want to get their IT departments involved until the very end. I might, or legal even, if it's going to be a contract issue, I might say, I know that you're really keen on getting this started, by X date. One of the red flags that we often come up against is IT, because they are going to be charged with implementing it, and there's a lot of steps there. Or you might say legal, because they're going to want to have a look at the agreement. Why don't we get them pulled into a conversation now to understand their concerns, so that we can address them proactively and not have your project held up? So telling them, using that as a differentiator to move the sale forward. I've seen clients even say, I know your other suppliers are probably not asking for this, but here's what I have found is the most successful approach. And then just tell them legal, IT, whatever that looks like. So those kinds of approaches do absolutely help to get people engaged in the sales cycle. Fantastic question. Thank you for sharing it. Okay. So let's, as we're wrapping up in our last 5 minutes together here, let's talk a little bit about using this and some of the results that we've seen, and share it with you one last study. So what I like to do, and I've kind of hinted at this a little bit, is using critical mass influence to really become an object of interest. So I know, back in the 90s, we talked about partnerships, very passé. We no longer want to be partners with our clients. And recently we've talked about being a trusted advisor. I think trusted advisor is very 2010 right now. I think what we need to be focused on in this decade is becoming an object of interest. We want to create an environment where our prospects look at us across the table and go, this is different. I haven't experienced this before. I really like this. I want more of this. And so we need to use this critical mass influence, this web that we built on the previous slide, to be consistently sharing value messaging. So whether that is, through LinkedIn or other social channels you might use, or your blog, or through phone calls, or through direct emails, there needs to be consistent value messaging from your organization out into that marketplace. There also needs to be ubiquity throughout all platforms that your company is using as a promotion tool, a marketing or a branding tool. I don't care whether a salesperson says to me, I don't like that. Facebook is stupid. Instagram is stupid. LinkedIn is stupid. If your customers are there, you have to be there. I always laugh with a lot of my old timers who don't like using online platforms. And I say to them, if I told you that 70% of your buyers were in the bar across the street, you'd be out of here so fast, right? But that's all we're talking about here. We're just saying they're not just, they're not at the coffee shop or at the bar, they're sitting on this platform. And so you need to be there, because if you aren't, they are still talking about you. You're just not there to see it, right? That whole attitude of, well, I'm not on Twitter, so they can't talk about us, is kind of like that 3-year-old, if I can't see you, you can't see me. It's ridiculous. And so we have to have this ubiquity across all platforms, and we have to be sharing really liberally and very generously. When I first started selling in the technology space, which was probably about 20 years ago, I was brought up with a sales methodology that said you never give away anything for free, no free consulting. Whereas today, if we don't give away value for free, prospects can't find us. You need to create an environment where they say, my God, I get so much value from Colleen for free. Just imagine what happens when I start paying her. That's the only way to build this business confidence. I'm not saying give your products away for free, but value, the results that your products produce for others. That's what we want to give away for free, liberally, generously, across all platforms, with all employees. And when you do that, you'll start to see that the movement of goal achievement for your salespeople slides upwards. In fact, the studies on this engagement, when you're becoming an object of interest and your clients are truly engaged with you, what you'll find in that truly engaged environment is that your current clients will buy 50% more frequently, that your current clients and your prospects will increase their spending with you by 200%, because you're selling to more people bigger opportunities across the entire organization, and that you'll improve brand loyalty by 5 times. So the results are incredibly clear as we work through this. It's just a matter of putting it into practice. You know, and I always say to people, I know this is not rocket science, right? I haven't talked about anything today that you can't 100% implement starting tomorrow. I have met, it's a willingness issue, right? I've met plenty of salespeople who are unwilling to do this. I've met plenty of companies that are unwilling to do it as well, which puts them at a huge disadvantage in today's buying economy. So, you know, I know we're about ready to wrap up here. You know, we probably have time for one question if it comes through, but I did want to encourage you guys to stay in touch with me. You are welcome to email me. Here's my email address, my website, you know, @Engage Colleen. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. I've got business pages there. You are welcome to follow me on those social platforms, on YouTube as well. We do a number of LinkedIn lives that get broadcasted across those platforms, and we share video newsletters on a weekly basis as well. Top pictures of my books, which are available on Amazon, or as I said, Right on the Money is just up there now. And so I threw the ISBN number on because sometimes it's hard to find because we haven't even started promoting it. In fact, you guys are the first group to hear about it. So I wanted to make sure to get that message out while I had an excited audience. So thank you so much for being here today. I really have enjoyed my time with you. Stay in touch, and if I can help out, definitely send me a note.
Thank you, Colleen, both for being here today and for sharing your experience with our audience today. As we knew it would be, you've provided some incredible insight and guidance. I was taking notes from my own efforts as we do fundraising with our alumni, as we work with foundations. You know, there were some key points that I took, and I attend all of these and always find a nugget here and there that I can use in my own world. So thank you. For our audience joining us today, we hope you found today useful and a resource for your own development. We invite you to join us for our upcoming distinguished sales speakers, which include in February, the topic of 6 energies of a complete sales warrior. That will feature Jason Forrest and Mary Marshall Forrest. In March, we'll have sales leadership coaching, and that will be Mary Marshall Forrest, who I think you'll find very interesting as well. We've had her husband, Jason Forrest, in here before. I think you'll find Mary just as exciting as Jason. And then in April, we will have session 2 of our Science of Selling with David Hoffeld. David was one of our fan favorites, if you will, when we did our survey. And so we're excited to have him come back in April. We invite you to stay connected to our upcoming sessions. You can visit our community engagement page on franklin.edu. Once you're there, you'll find ways to engage in development opportunities that are offered not only through the sales series, but our Leadership Center, our Global Center for Healthcare Education, and our Center for Public Safety and Cybersecurity Education. You can also subscribe to receive our monthly events digest when you're on that page as well. If you're looking for other opportunities, I'm really excited to announce that we have launched a Franklin Works Marketplace. That is a sort of one-stop shopping for an ever-expanding catalog of learning options in areas that offer self-paced short-term learning options. I think as you mentioned, a number of people leaving their jobs either to, you know, I'm done completely, or I'm moving to a different industry. There's some good opportunities there. So with all of that, I just want to say thank you for attending today. Thank you, Colleen, for sharing some really great insights. I hope to see all of you next month and for months to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.